Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to today's Caffeine for the Soul. And today is the first of a 5-part series where I'm going to share excerpts from the new audiobook of Supercoach, 10 Secrets to Transform Anyone's Life. And this first excerpt that I'm going to share today is an explanation of why 10 years later, 10 years after I wrote my very first book about the principles, I sat down to completely rewrite it. And hopefully that will all make sense in just a few minutes. 10 years later. In the early years of a coaching career that has now spanned 3 decades, I often saw myself as a preacher in search of a gospel. I knew I was gifted with the ability to say things in a way that people could hear. I just wasn't always sure I had anything particularly worth saying. That all changed in the 18 months or so leading up to writing the original version of Supercoach. I'd come across a book by Dr. George Pransky called The Relationship Handbook, and I was sufficiently intrigued by what I'd read to go and visit him in the Pacific Northwest and spend some time working with one of his colleagues, Dr. Keith Blevins. To my surprise, I had what I can only describe as a spiritual epiphany when I was there, and it changed me at a fundamental level. Before that moment, I had been a high-functioning depressive. After that moment, I was genuinely happy in a way I hadn't been since I was a young child. At first, I thought I'd finally found my gospel, but after a time I came to see that what I had actually found was even better than that. I'd found that space inside myself and all human beings that could be seen as the source of all gospels. Because I wasn't remotely religious and was in fact uncomfortable with all things spiritual, I set about writing about what I'd experienced in a way that I thought would still maintain my street cred as a hyper-rational man of the world. My first attempt at putting words to the indescribable feelings was in the form of a novella. To my surprise, both my wife and my publisher asked me not to bring it out, as they felt it was too much of a leap from my previous work. It remains unpublished. Downhearted, but not defeated, I got on a plane with a couple of friends from the entertainment industry and got rip-snortingly drunk. On one of my many subsequent trips to the restroom, a new book started writing itself in my head. It would be built around 10 insights, or secrets, and would share what I was seeing about the human potential in the form of a coaching conversation with an imaginary client. I raced back to my seat and began taking notes. Around 2 a.m. the next morning, wide awake with jet lag and creative adrenaline, I opened up my computer, typed up my notes, and sent them off to my agent. When I next opened my computer, around 8 a.m., I was surprised to see an email from him saying that he had sent the notes off to Hay House, and they had offered to publish the book when it was written. The book was a hit, and it led to my starting an international coach training school called Supercoach Academy, which has now trained people from over 40 countries in the art and science of transformative coaching. And as my understanding of the principles I had first shared in Supercoach evolved, I wrote a trilogy of books elucidating them further: The Inside Out Revolution, The Space Within, and Creating the Impossible. So why do a revised and updated edition of Supercoach? One of my early mentors, the co-founder of neurolinguistic programming and prolific author Dr. Richard Bandler, used to say, "There are people all over the world stuck at various stages of my personal development." He was referring to the fact that while he was continually learning and evolving, both in himself and his work, wherever he went, there were people holding up his earlier writings as the truth and wondering why he had changed his mind. In my own life, I noticed myself cringing a little whenever people came up to me and thanked me for writing Supercoach. While I had thought it to be a definitive work at the time that I wrote it, in subsequent visits to the text, I began to see that the book was an inadvertent hybrid of the kind of empowering self-help books I had written early in my career and the new nascent understanding I was attempting to articulate. I began rewriting sections of the book, not for publication but as a resource for my clients and students. After sharing a few of these sections more widely and receiving extremely positive feedback, I mentioned to my agent that I was thinking of rewriting the whole manuscript. Less than 72 hours later, he emailed to say that Hay House was once again interested in publishing the book when it was written. Early on during the rewriting process, I made the decision that rather than start from scratch, I would attempt to keep as much of the original text as I could. So if you were a fan of the original version, you'll be pleased to find many of the ideas and stories from the original work peppered throughout this one. But some sections required complete excision from the manuscript, while others required new stories and explanations, both to bridge the gaps in the narrative and to flesh out the key points I was trying to make. So 2 pieces of advice before you begin. 1. If you're completely new to the book, just enjoy it. I trust that you will find it enlightening, and that as you read, your experience of life will begin to change for the better, often without effort, and sometimes even without being able to point to a particular reason why. 2. If you read the original, or are a fan of any of the 100+ books that have emerged in the field of the 3 principles since Supercoach was first published back in 2009, I encourage you to see this for what it is: a gentle introduction to some game-changing truths about life, designed for people who want to better their own lives and make more of a positive difference in the world. Have fun, learn heaps, and happy exploring. With all my love, Michael. Tomorrow I'll be sharing another excerpt from the audiobook about what I learned from my dogs about goals. And if you want to learn more about the book and how to order it, go to www.michaelneill.org/supercoach. Have fun, learn heaps, happy exploring, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.